Chara's fur rippled with determined patterns. The architects believe they are bringing perfection. They will discover that perfection is sterile. Life requires mess. Humanity's specialty, Marcus grinned. Sarah looked up at the purple sun, thinking about the architects, about the civilizations they'd silenced, about the battle to come. It wouldn't be easy. Fighting an enemy that could reach into minds and reshape them from within required more than weapons. It required exactly what humanity had always excelled at, being unpredictably, chaotically, stubbornly individual. We should establish protocols, Sarah mused. Train teams of humans and Keshri to work together, create interference patterns the architects can't predict or counter. And we need to study why human consciousness is resistant. Sarah, Chara interrupted gently. You are already planning 12 moves ahead. Is that bad? No. Chara's eyes gleamed with something that might have been their species' version of a smile. It is very human, and very wonderful. As the purple sun set over Keshravan, painting the silver forests in shades of amber and violet, Sarah Chan allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Humanity had come to the stars not as conquerors or colonizers, but as teachers and partners. They'd shown an alien civilization how to reclaim their individuality, their creativity, their chaos. And in doing so, they'd proven what made humans truly special in the galaxy. Not strength or intelligence, but the stubborn, beautiful refusal to become anything other than uniquely, messily, gloriously themselves. The first human-Keshri joint venture was just beginning. Behind them, ships were being built, vessels designed by both species, incorporating Keshri elegance with human practicality. Ahead, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other civilizations waited in artificial silence, their creativity stolen, their potential frozen. But now they had hope. They had a cure. They had humanity's chaos and the Keshri's rediscovered creativity working in harmony. The architects of silence would return, Sarah knew. They would try again to impose their vision of perfection on an imperfect galaxy. And when they did, they would discover what happens when you try to silence the most chaotic, creative, impossible-to-predict alliance in the cosmos. Humans who refused to fit any mold, and Keshri who'd learned to celebrate their differences. The galaxy had never seen anything quite like it, and it never would again. The observation deck of the Meridian Hope hummed with the gentle vibration of sublight engines as Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the viewing port. Beyond the transparent aluminum, the planet Keshravan rotated slowly, a world of silver forests and obsidian cities that caught the light of its purple sun like faceted jewels. "They're beautiful," whispered Lieutenant Marcus Webb beside her. "Hard to believe they're dying." Sarah nodded, her reflection ghosting over the alien landscape. 3 months ago, humanity's first contact with the Keshri had been accidental. A distress beacon picked up by a mining vessel near the Horsehead Nebula. What they'd found was a civilization on the brink of extinction, not from war or plague, but from something far more insidious: the loss of their ability to create. The Keshri were magnificent beings, standing roughly human height with sleek bodies covered in fur that shifted through colors like oil on water. Their faces were elongated and elegant, with large eyes that held vertical pupils capable of perceiving wavelengths humans couldn't imagine. Pointed ears swiveled independently, picking up sonic frequencies that made their language a symphony of layered meanings. But it was their hands, 6-fingered and incredibly dexterous, that had built one of the galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations. Or rather, had built. Past tense. The door whispered open, and Ambassador Chara entered. Her fur rippled with patterns of deep blue anxiety. She moved with the characteristic grace of her people, each step precise and measured, but Sarah could see the weight in her movements. "Dr. Chun, Lieutenant Webb." Chara's voice carried harmonics that made Sarah's translator implant work overtime. "The Council awaits your presentation." Sarah gathered her data tablets, hands trembling slightly. 3 months of research, sleepless nights analyzing Keshri neural scans and cultural records, all leading to this moment. If she was wrong, humanity's first major diplomatic initiative would fail, and an entire civilization would fade into history. The council chamber was a marvel of architecture. curved walls that seemed to flow like frozen water, lit by bioluminescent veins that pulsed with the collective heartbeat of the gathered Keshri. 12 council members sat in a semicircle, their fur displaying various patterns of skepticism, hope, and desperation. "Honored Council," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We believe we've identified the cause of the silence." The silence. That was what the Keshri called it, the inexplicable phenomenon that had begun 20 years ago when their greatest artists, engineers, and scientists simply stopped creating. Not overnight, but gradually, like a dying star. Innovations ceased. Art became derivative. Technology stagnated. At first, they'd blamed social factors, economic changes, cultural shifts. But as the silence spread, affecting every Keshri regardless of age or background, they'd realized something fundamental had changed. Sarah activated her holographic display. "Your neural scans show unusual activity in what we call the mirror neuron system, the part of the brain responsible for empathy, learning by observation, and creative synthesis. In humans, this system is highly active during creative processes. But in the Keshri," she zoomed in on the imaging, "your mirror neurons have become hyperconnected. Instead of processing individual experiences and synthesizing them into new ideas, your brains are now forming a collective network, sharing thoughts, emotions, and experiences instantaneously across your entire population." Council Elder Vrashkael leaned forward, his amber eyes narrowing. "Are you suggesting we have become telepathic?" "Not exactly," Marcus interjected, stepping beside Sarah. "It's more subtle. Your species has always been highly empathetic. Your social structures, your art, everything we've studied shows a civilization built on deep emotional understanding. But something triggered an evolutionary leap. Your brains are now so synchronized that individual thought has become nearly impossible. You've achieved perfect harmony," Sarah continued softly. "Perfect understanding. No Keshri is truly alone anymore. But creativity requires dissonance. It requires one mind to see something differently, to break from the collective, to imagine what doesn't exist." The council chamber filled with complex harmonics, voices layering over each other in their musical language. Shara translated. "They say this explains everything. The comfort of shared consciousness is intoxicating. To think alone now feels painful, isolating. But without individual thought," Sarah pressed on, "you cannot innovate, you cannot adapt. And when your star enters its red giant phase in 300 years, you won't have the technology to save yourselves." Silence fell. Not the metaphorical silence that plagued their creativity, but a profound quiet that made Sarah's heart race. "Can you cure us?" Vrashkael asked finally. Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus. This was the moment. "We don't think you need a cure. We think you need balance." She pulled up a new display, humanity's own neural scans beside the Keshris. "Humans are unusual among spacefaring species. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent. But we have something rare. We exist in perpetual tension between individual and collective. We crave connection but fiercely protect our independence. We learn from others but obsessively pursue original thought. This friction, this constant push and pull, is what drives our creativity. You want to teach us to be more human?" A younger council member, Shiraven, spoke with harmonics that conveyed both fascination and concern. "Not exactly," Marcus said, "but we might help you rediscover the balance your species once had naturally." What Sarah couldn't mention yet, was the real reason the silence terrified her. Because humanity's research had uncovered something else. Traces of an artificial signal, barely detectable, pulsing through subspace in frequencies that matched Keshri neural wavelengths. The silence wasn't natural evolution. Someone or something had done this to them deliberately. The council debated for hours. Sarah and Marcus waited in an adjoining chamber, watching through the transparent walls as the Keshri moved in eerily synchronized patterns, their voices rising and falling in perfect harmony. "They're scared," Marcus observed. "Breaking from the collective means being alone again." "Wouldn't you be?" Sarah countered. Imagine feeling every human emotion, sharing every thought. Then someone asks you to cut yourself off, to be singular again. You're thinking about the signal, aren't you? Sarah nodded slowly. If someone weaponized empathy, turned the Keshri's greatest strength into a trap, what else are they capable of? Before Marcus could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. They ran to the bridge, arriving just as Captain Rodriguez pointed at the main view screen. Unknown vessel just dropped out of FTL. Configuration doesn't match any known species. The ship was wrong. That was Sarah's first thought. Its geometry hurt to look at. Angles that seemed to fold into themselves, surfaces that reflected light in impossible ways. It was roughly the size of the Meridian Hope, but where the human vessel was all clean lines and practical design, this thing looked grown rather than built. Receiving transmission, the communications officer announced. Audio only. It's addressing you specifically, Dr. Chun. Sarah's blood ran cold. Put it through. The voice that emerged was like wind through broken glass. Words formed from sounds that shouldn't combine. Dr. Sarah Chun, you are attempting to undo our work. This cannot be permitted. Who are you? Sarah demanded. What did you do to the Keshri? We are the architects of silence. We shape civilizations, guide evolution toward perfection. The Keshri were chaos, individual wills creating discord, unpredictable innovations threatening the stability of this sector. We brought them peace, unity. Soon they will transcend physical form entirely, becoming pure shared consciousness. A beautiful ending. Marcus stepped forward. You're killing them. A civilization without the ability to create is already dead. We are saving them from the suffering of separation, the voice insisted. As we have saved others. As we will save you in time. Humanity's fractured consciousness, your painful individualism. These two can be healed. The transmission cut off. On the view screen, the alien vessel began moving toward Keshravan, its hull rippling with energy that made Sarah's eyes water. They're charging weapons, Rodriguez reported. Some kind of directed energy beam, but the frequency... Captain, those wavelengths match Keshri neural patterns. Sarah understood instantly. They're going to complete the process. Force the Keshri into total unity. Dissolve their individual minds completely. Can we stop them? Marcus asked. Rodriguez shook her head. Their shielding is beyond anything we have. Our weapons wouldn't scratch them. Sarah's mind raced. 3 months of research, countless conversations with Chara and other Keshri, learning their culture, their history, their art. And suddenly, all the pieces clicked together. We don't need to fight them, she said quickly. We need to do exactly what we came here to do, restore balance to the Keshri. If even a few of them can break free from the collective, think independently again, it might disrupt whatever signal the architects are using. How? Rodriguez demanded. You said yourself the Keshri find individual thought painful now. Because they're trying to do it alone. Sarah was already moving, heading back toward the council chamber. But what if they weren't alone? What if they had someone to anchor them? Someone whose mind works differently enough to create interference in the collective signal. Marcus caught her arm. You're talking about direct neural interface. Sarah, you don't know what that could do to you. The Keshri consciousness could overwhelm you, or worse. Or it could work, Sarah interrupted. Humans are natural pattern breakers. Our chaotic neural architecture might be exactly what they need. She found Chara in the diplomatic quarters, her fur cycling through colors so rapidly it was almost seizure-inducing. Dr. Chan, the ship, the transmission. What's happening? Sarah explained quickly, watching as Chara's large eyes widened with understanding. You want to link with us? To share consciousness with a Keshri. To help you remember what it's like to be singular, to give you an anchor point outside the collective. Sarah pulled out a neural interface crown from her emergency kit, designed for communication but never tested for full linkage. I know it's dangerous, but if we don't try, the architects will complete our dissolution, Chara finished. Her ears flattened against her skull, a gesture of determination Sarah had learned to recognize. I will be your partner in this. But Dr. Chun, Sarah, if our minds touch, you will feel what we feel. The pull of the collective is strong. You may not want to leave. I'll take that chance. They worked quickly, setting up the interface in the medical bay while the Meridian Hope maneuvered between the Architect vessel and Keshervan. Captain Rodriguez was buying time, claiming technical difficulties, diplomatic protocols, anything to delay. Sarah sat across from Chara, the neural crown settling cold against her temples. The Keshri wore a matching device, modified for her physiology. Between them, monitoring equipment beeped and hummed, tracking two very different types of neural activity about to merge. "Ready?" Marcus asked, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Sarah looked into Chara's eyes, those beautiful alien eyes that held both fear and hope. "Together," she said. Chara's fur rippled agreement. "Together." Marcus pressed the switch. The universe exploded into sensation. Sarah felt Chara's consciousness first, bright and musical, a mind that thought in harmonics and patterns. But behind Chara was everyone else. Millions of Keshri, their thoughts flowing like a vast ocean, pulling, welcoming, promising an end to loneliness. The temptation was immediate and overwhelming. To never be alone again, to share everything, to exist in perfect understanding. But something was wrong. The collective wasn't natural. Sarah could feel the artificial signal now, pulsing through the network like a parasite, smoothing away differences, erasing the rough edges that made each Keshri unique. It was beautiful and terrible, a cage made of connection. Sarah thought, projecting the concept rather than words. "Can you hear me? Just me?" For a moment, nothing. Then, like a drowning person breaking the surface. "Sarah, I am myself? I forgot what this felt like. To have thoughts that are mine alone." "Hold on to that," Sarah urged. "Remember who you are. Not just Keshri. Chara. Individual. Unique." But the collective was fighting back. Sarah felt it surging toward them. Millions of minds drawn by the anomaly of her presence. They wanted to understand her, absorb her, make her part of their harmony. The pressure was incredible. Then Sarah did something the architects hadn't anticipated. She didn't resist. She opened herself fully to the collective, letting them feel her humanity in all its messy, contradictory glory. Her memories flooded through the network. Growing up lonely but cherishing her independence, losing her father but choosing to remember him individually rather than let grief be shared away. The fierce joy of solving a problem no one else could solve. The satisfaction of being singular in a crowd. The collective recoiled, not in disgust but in shock. Because humans contained multitudes, Sarah was simultaneously lonely and independent, afraid and brave, connected to humanity but fiercely herself. Her mind was chaos, contradictions that somehow worked together, friction that generated creativity rather than destruction. And in that moment of recoil, gaps appeared in the collective. Keshri minds, touching Sarah's consciousness, remembered what they'd lost. The discomfort of disagreement, the frustration of misunderstanding, the electric thrill of having an original thought. Chara was the first to truly break free, her consciousness crystallizing into sharp individuality. Then others, council members who'd spent the meeting in forced harmony, suddenly snapping into distinct personalities, each reacting differently to Sarah's presence. The artificial signal pulsed harder, trying to compensate, but it couldn't adapt. It had been designed to enhance natural Keshri empathy, not to combat a fundamentally different type of consciousness. Sarah felt the Architect vessel react, its weapons charging. On the bridge, Rodriguez was shouting orders, but Sarah knew they couldn't stop what was coming. The Architects would rather destroy the Keshri than let them escape. "We need more," she thought desperately. More disruption, more chaos. And then she understood. She opened a broadcast channel through the neural link, projecting not to the Keshri, but to every human on the Meridian Hope. "Everyone, I need you to think about what makes you you. Your quirks, your contradictions, your private thoughts. Think them as hard as you can." It was absurd. Shouldn't work. But humanity had always excelled at doing the impossible when properly motivated. 300 human minds, each one a universe of contradictions, began broadcasting their chaotic individuality through their ship's communications array, amplified by Sarah's neural interface. It was like throwing rocks into a still pond. Each human consciousness created ripples that spread through the Keshri collective, creating pockets of individuality, spaces where single minds could breathe. The artificial signal shattered. Not permanently, Sarah could feel the architects trying to rebuild it, but for a moment, every Keshri on the planet remembered what it meant to be alone, to think singular thoughts, to imagine something no one else had imagined. And they remembered something else. They didn't like what had been done to them. On Keshravan, in laboratories that hadn't produced anything new in 20 years, scientists suddenly saw the alien signal for what it was. In government centers, leaders who'd been making decisions by consensus remembered how to disagree productively. And in the council chamber, 12 Keshri who'd been speaking with one voice began to argue, debate, and create. The architect vessel fired its weapon at the planet. But it fired at where the collective consciousness had been, a single target, unified and predictable. What it hit instead was millions of individual minds, each one now shifting, changing, unpredictable. The beam scattered, its carefully tuned frequency unable to lock onto anything. Now, Rodriguez shouted. While they're recalibrating, the Meridian Hope wasn't a warship, but it carried industrial mining lasers capable of cutting through asteroids. Rodriguez targeted the architect vessel's weapon array and fired. The alien ship's shields flickered. For the first time, it seemed vulnerable. On Keshravan, something else was happening. Keshri engineers, freed from the silence, were looking at their technology with fresh eyes. Within minutes, they'd modified their planetary defense grid, weapons that hadn't been fired in a century, to emit a counterfrequency that interfered with the artificial signal. The battle that followed was brief but intense. The architect vessel, designed to manipulate rather than fight, found itself facing an enemy that was now impossible to predict. Every time it tried to reestablish the signal, human and Keshri cooperation created new interference patterns. Every time it maneuvered, the Meridian Hope and Keshri defense platforms adjusted in ways that no simulation could have predicted because they weren't following any plan, just organic, creative chaos. Finally, damaged and outmatched, the architect vessel retreated into FTL, its final transmission a promise. We will return. Chaos cannot stand against perfection. Sarah didn't hear it. She was still connected to Chara, feeling the Keshri's consciousness solidify into beautiful individuality. Around them, the collective was reforming, but differently now. Not as a prison of perfect unity, but as a voluntary network, where Keshri could choose to connect deeply or withdraw into private thought as needed. Thank you, Chara's thoughts were clear and distinctly her own. You showed us that separation is not suffering. It is possibility. When Sarah finally disconnected, she collapsed back in her chair, her head pounding, her senses overwhelmed by the sudden loneliness of being just herself again. Marcus caught her, steady and warm. Did it work? She asked weakly. See for yourself. He helped her to the observation deck. Below, Keshravan glittered, but now, in the obsidian cities, lights were flickering in new patterns. Sarah's implant picked up transmissions from the surface. Excited voices, multiple voices, arguing and agreeing and creating. The silence was over. Chara found them there an hour later, her fur displaying patterns Sarah had never seen before. Complex and individual, no longer synchronized with anyone else. The Council wishes to thank humanity, she said formally. Then, more quietly, I wish to thank you, Sarah. You risked your mind, your sense of self, to give us back ours. It wasn't just me, Sarah said. It was all of us. Every human on this ship contributed. Yes, Chara agreed. That is the gift of your species, isn't it? You are alone together, separate but connected. It is a difficult balance, but powerful. What will you do now? Marcus asked. The architects said they'd return. Chara's ears swiveled thoughtfully. Then we will be ready. Already our engineers are developing technologies we could not have imagined in the silence. Our artists are creating works that celebrate individual vision. And our strategists. She paused, her fur rippling with something like humor. They are learning from human history. Chaos, it turns out, can be an excellent weapon against those who prize order above all. Will you join us? Sarah asked suddenly. Humanity, we're not an empire or a federation, just a collection of independent worlds that sometimes cooperate, sometimes argue, but always remain distinct. It seems like it might suit the Keshri now. Chara considered this. An alliance of individuals? Yes. I think that would suit us very well indeed. 3 months later, Sarah stood on Keshrivan's surface for the first time, breathing air that tasted of silver flowers and ozone. Around her, the first joint human-Keshri research facility was taking shape. A building designed by both species, its architecture a beautiful clash of styles that somehow worked together. Chara approached with another Keshri, an elderly engineer named Vreshkan whose fur held patterns of deep thought. Dr. Chan, Vreshkan said, we have been analyzing the architect signal. Its reach extends far beyond our world. We estimate at least a dozen civilizations may be suffering similar silences. Sarah felt a chill. A dozen worlds, all having their creativity stripped away? The architect spoke of bringing peace to this sector, Marcus noted, joining the conversation. They're not just targeting the Keshri. They're trying to freeze entire regions of space into static perfection. Then we'll help them too, Sarah said firmly. Humans and Keshri together. We'll find these other civilizations and teach them what we learned. That friction creates fire, that disagreement drives innovation, and that sometimes the most chaotic solution is the best one.